Wolves stick to the pact for their own survival and well-being. It's inherently selfish, but this selfishness ends up helping them as a whole, with everyone benefiting from this newfound safety and strength in numbers. Gaming trends are the same way, with publishers hopping on other ideas for the benefit of themselves and the strength in those numbers. The only people who suffer are the prey. With gaming publishers, gamers are that prey. They create these predatory systems that squeeze every last cent out of the player because at the end of the day, they are a company trying to make money, run by higher-up corporates who know nothing about modern gaming or the people they're selling to, yet making decisions anyway because that's how business society has always been run, and will continue to be run until gamers put their foot down, demanding otherwise. Bloodborne is a part of the Souls series by From Software, a third-person perspective game that focuses on weapons and magic-based combat with monsters and exploration. Players battle bosses to advance and travel from bonfire to bonfire that acts as a save point, letting players respawn there and continue to the next area. The series is notable for its difficulty and requires the player to travel through medieval settings and interconnected environments in order to progress through the story, or if you can even really call it that. Each Soulsborne game is sort of the same formula with a different twist on the story. Whereas the original games weren't as far from the typical modern standards, the industry has grown and changed and have slowly evolved into one of the most outlandish and specialized niche games. The first game to be released was Demon's Souls on the PlayStation 3 in 2009. It was a huge risk for something that had never been done before, with a large connected world and an insanely hard difficulty, but the quality of the game was realized and shined through, quickly becoming a cult classic. With that, From Software followed with their most notable series, Dark Souls. It was mostly the same formula, but some changes, with the gameplay being slower, the connectivity overall sort of falling off as the series went on, but improving in other ways, and notably storytelling. Dark Souls in 2011 and its sequels Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 released in 2004 and 2016 respectively. But then there was this new IP, one that was a part of the series but sort of diverted from the Dark Souls standard that From Software had gotten accustomed to. It was called Bloodborne. It was created between the development cycles of Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3, releasing in March 24th, 2015, and instantly became a success, even for the Souls series. It changed not only the modern gaming formula, but also changed the Souls formula, pushing the boundaries of what a game could be.
How I feel about the campaign and storyline? Well, they don't directly explain anything. It's given to you in like little tidbits of lore and things you find around the town.
Bloodborne's campaign and storyline is hidden throughout the world with no central or linear story at any one time. It's found through tidbits of descriptions and items, and in character dialogue scattered throughout the world. Industry wisdom says this doesn't work. It says that it's impractical, leads to a disjumbled story with no center of focus, and that most players won't get to experience, or will even be interested enough to experience it. Modern games therefore opt to have a story that almost holds your hand with a completely straightforward and linear design, that often end up with markers galore telling one constantly where to go, leading to huge dialogue dumps of information, and a linear storytelling that makes the player feel restricted throughout the campaign. Games like Call of Duty with annual releases have constant single-player linear experiences because that's what's expected out of them, and that's what the industry has always gone by. This creating an atmosphere with a lack of creativity and risks, and with almost every single game throwing in mediocre single-player just to adhere to these standards. While this is not necessarily a bad kind of storytelling and can be done right, it has often led people astray, believing that there's only one kind of story to tell, a linear or direct story. That often ends up with people treating players like they're stupid or not competent, which is the opposite of what you want to do as a game developer.
The campaign, I feel like, unlike a lot of video games these days, the campaign is straightforward and there's tons of cinematic cutscenes where it's like watching a movie. But Bloodborne, the campaign isn't a movie you watch. Like, it's something you learn and develop.
Bloodborne is a breath of fresh air in this regard, and proves all of the previous statements wrong, showing that an unconventional form of storytelling can actually outshine its linear counterpart. It shows that, if written well, unconventional stories can still be focused, engaging, and feel rewarding without the linear, instant gratification, and without that linear, direct line of story driving the character through the plot, and that one can actually decipher and find out the story itself, and have it still be a pleasure and feel like a joy to figure out the story, instead of it feeling like it's being spoon-fed to them, or like a chore to get through to get to the actual meat of the game. There are entire subreddits and groups dedicated to deciphering and putting together the lore of this game, showing that dedicated players, if they want, can go deep or as in-depth as they want in the lore of this game, while people who don't care for it don't have to go on it at all and can focus more on the main gameplay aspects of the game, having a win-win situation for both sides and showing a game that specializes to the need of the individual. The Souls series has little multiplayer, and when it does, it isn't conventional. Industry wisdom says to add multiplayer to increase playtime, add extra features to make the game feel more complete, and to add predatory loot box systems to get as much money as they can out of the player. It makes the game more marketable and sound like a better deal for players, and allows them to put in more hours of playtime into the game, making them more likely to get invested and spend more money in the game. Yet most modern publishers have this disconnect with their fans, and use the multiplayer as a shoddy excuse to throw in marketing ploys for their own benefit, not because it would actually benefit the game.
I like how they do the multiplayer. You give up one of the in-game currencies to have someone assist you. And while I feel like it does make the game significantly easier, it's kind of helpful to have something like that, because a lot of people, if they get stuck at a boss, they quit the game. But with being able to summon help, it makes it a lot of fun, because you can explore the campaign and the world together and learn about it as you go on.
They don't add multiplayer to extend playtime, to check off a checkbox on this long list of stuff they need to do, or to market it, but they add it because it fits the game. Due to the game's tremendous difficulty, the multiplayer is to help people who don't want to have to deal with that difficulty and want to share the game experience with somebody else. When you go into the multiplayer in Bloodborne, it makes the game easier since you have 2 players, and the difficulty does not scare them nearly as much as it did in previous games. They also added PvP that works in a highly intricate and time-based combat system for those who want to challenge against other players and not just bosses that feel like bullet sponges. They go against modern gaming practices, which actually end up boosting brand loyalty and the loyalty to the game in general. The philosophy increases the game's overall quality, so those who play it make sure that they like the game itself and will recommend it and spread the word more. It tries to prioritize the quality of the game before adding any extra things to make it more marketable or look better to the public eye. This unique multiplayer gives people who are bored of the modern formula a fresh take on it, and it adds meaningful gameplay that changes accessibility and makes it feel like the publishers won't conform to modern business practices. Multiplayer is normally used as a catalyst for microtransactions. These often necessary items are hid behind paywalls, and actions to push the player towards a purchase are constant and often highly immoral. Big publishers like EA with the Battlefront 2 fiasco learn the outrage that comes with these kind of microtransactions, the predatory ones that try to get the player for every cent they have. Yet, everyone else still continues to add them due to the sheer amount of money made from the microtransactions, sometimes even exceeding the sales numbers of the games. While microtransactions aren't inherently bad, many publishers use them to push their players to their extremes and to maximize their profit.
A lot of games these days, their fan base is dwindling because people who don't have money to pay for the things that make them good at the game, they get lost in the increase of skill, because everyone else is buying the cool stuff and you're left there with nothing because you have to buy things to get good. But with Bloodborne, you have to figure it out yourself. You can't buy a good weapon and get good at it. You can't buy good armor and just bypass through the whole game.
This is short-sighted, impulsive action often leads to a game and company hurting its own longevity, prioritizing their current self and their current profits over their future success. A lack of microtransactions actually ends up boosting the reputation of the publisher in the game, and while they might lose money in the short term, they often do not get that bad press or lose sales over people being outraged with their predatory loot box or microtransactions in the future.
I'm really happy they don't have any of them. The DLCs that they have, that's all they have. The DLCs, they unlock an area and a boss. You don't get a new gun, you don't get a new weapon that changes how you play the game.
It still succeeded, made a profit, and built up the reputation and loyalty of fans and the series, treating them more than just mindless cash cows. This trust and loyalty allows players to purchase new IPs of the series, or just the next game without doubt, increasing Bloodborne's income and bettering their perception in the long run.
Because it's all about skill. You learn as you grow, as you die, which is the game's based off a lot of dying. As you die, you learn from your mistakes. And if you don't learn from your mistakes, you get killed the same way over and over again.
Soulsborne is a notoriously hard game with unflinching and unforgiving game mechanics. Industry wisdom says that making games harder only serves to hurt the game itself, that it infuriates players and lessens the game accessibility. Most games go the route of making it as easy and appealing as it can to the widest amount of audience in order to bolster their sales and to lessen players being aggravated by the game's difficulty. These publishers do not understand the gamer's wants and demands. They don't realize a game can be good and difficult as long as you put in the effort to fine-tune the system and fit it for your style of game. You could want a game that feels too easy because that loses interest, but you don't want a game so hard that it frustrates players and makes the game seem unfair. Bloodborne hits the perfect balance between these, where when you fail, you know it's your fault, not a gimmick of the game.
I feel like it's honestly a rather fair game. Even though the bosses are difficult, I didn't ever get stuck to the point where I wanted to give up on the game and curse the developers, because with the other games that they've designed, they really did that. They made the bosses ridiculously hard on purpose. But Bloodborne, I feel like they do a good job of balancing the bosses to where they're difficult, you could still enjoy fighting them in the end.
You can join other players if you like the easier gameplay or don't have as much time to play, while if you like the hard, higher skill curve that comes with many of the other games and more synonymous with the From Software name, you can play it alone. It's for everybody and lets the player choose. Difficulty makes a game intriguing, so stripping it from a game solely to sell more copies comes at the detriment of the quality of the game. This is where From Software puts their foot down and shows fans that they're making a quality game first over its marketability, developing their loyalty and boosting their brand rep. Modern publishers value their income and revenue over their fans' loyalty and their own reputation. They see customers as no more than numbers to bolster their statistics for investors. Time and time again, this has proved to be a sustainable business model and will continue to be until gamers finally put their foot down and speak out. That only leaves a soulless husk of a game, so in a game that goes against almost all preconceived stereotypes, it's almost a breath of fresh air to gamers because good game publishers are like camp counselors. You look up to them, you trust them, you respect them, and when they do something new, you just know you have to check it out. Whether they're building the same campfire that you've already seen 1,000 times, or doing something entirely new, you know you want to see it or see how it goes because you know that it will be fun. You know that whatever they do, you will love it regardless, and these good game publishers are the same way. Very few publishers in 2018 go with quality over quantity and prioritize making a good game first before making money off of it, especially when it means deviating from industry wisdom. But From Software definitely has joined the rankings and has been permanently cemented as one of my camp counselors.